Can a stranger's small act of kindness change your whole life? That's exactly what happened to Daniel. But what about you? Has anyone ever saved you when you least expected it? Tell me in the comments. I'd love to know. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the bell so you won't miss what happens next. The morning wasn't supposed to be eventful. It was the quiet slice of day Daniel kept for himself, a soft pocket of time before emails and fluorescent lights. Then he saw her on a bench by the path, shoulders tight, eyes shining with that desperate "don't look at me" focus. The side seam of her dress had given way, a clean split that flashed pale lining when she shifted. People glanced, then politely pretended they hadn't. Daniel felt that old tug, the one his mother had trained into him: move your feet when kindness calls. He approached with both hands visible. "Hey," he said, easy and calm. "I don't want to startle you. I think I can help." Her chin lifted like a bell had been struck. She tried to laugh and failed. "I'm fine." She wasn't. He offered the small tin he always carried: bandage, tiny scissors, a couple of safety pins, a folded square of clean cloth. "I fix things," he added, like it was a hobby, not a habit. She watched his face for a beat, measuring for pity or performance. Finding neither, she nodded, then angled her body so he could pass her the pin without being obvious. He looked away as she worked, giving her peripheral privacy, guiding only when she fumbled the fabric. Through the fold, he murmured, "So it won't show." A cyclist whipped around the curve too fast, tires skittering on grit. Instinct yanked Daniel forward. His hand landed on her shoulder and pulled her in a heartbeat closer than strangers ever are. The bike hissed past with a curse and a blast of wind. For a second they stood like that, her breath at his collar, his pulse a wild hammer, then both stepped back, embarrassed and oddly awake. She finished with the pin, smoothed the line, and the crisis shrank from humiliation to secret. "Thank you," she said, voice thick with relief. "I have something important. This would have wrecked it." He smiled. "Then I'm glad I packed the world's least cool kit." "I'm Leah," she offered, like the name itself was an apology for the morning. "Daniel," he said. No handshake, just a quick mutual nod that felt more binding than it should. A car horn somewhere, a dog yapping, the day starting to make noise again. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear and glanced at her watch with a flinch that read, "I'm late." "You saved me," she said, lighter now, but with a kind of sincerity that doesn't let you brush it off. "You saved yourself," he countered. "I was just the spare part." Her laugh found its footing. "Still, thank you." She hurried away with a careful stride, testing the fix, shoulders loosening with every step until the crowd folded her up and she was gone. Daniel stood a moment longer, oddly buoyant, the near miss and the small rescue humming through him like caffeine. By the time he reached his car, the morning had snapped back into its usual shape. Traffic, coffee, the elevator, the polite hellos that grease an office into motion. He slid into his chair, woke his screen, and told himself not to replay the bench scene like a movie. It replayed anyway: her relief, the stupidly fast bike, the ridiculous luck of having a pin. He shook it off when the first meeting hit his calendar. The floor buzzed more than usual. It wasn't just the Monday hangover. It was that charged whisper that runs along cubicle walls when something new is about to be announced. Jonas from compliance leaned on Daniel's divider with the grin of someone who loves news more than lunch. "Heads up," he said. "New head of operations. Young. Tough. From upstairs, but not the usual upstairs." He waggled his brows like that meant anything specific. Daniel answered with a non-committal "nice" and kept typing. Leaders came and went. He stayed, built the thing in front of him, and let other people name the vision. The calendar pinged. All hands in 15. People funneled toward the glass fishbowl of a conference room, carrying mugs like security blankets. The HR director did the throat clear and thank you shuffle, and the air took on that expectant thinness before a curtain rises. Daniel grabbed a chair near the back and told himself to be civilized about whatever pep talk was incoming. The door opened. He looked up and felt his stomach drop like an elevator in free fall. Leah stepped in, hairpin neat, suit cut to mean business without shouting it, the exact person you'd believe if she said the ship could be turned by noon. For a beat, the room blurred and snapped back into focus. Her gaze crossed the crowd, not searching, but aware, and landed on the back row. Recognition lit like a match, and then so fast he could have imagined it flickered down to something composed. "Good morning," she said, voice steady. "I'm Leah Hartman. I'm here to learn how this team wins, and to help it win bigger." Polite laughs. Pens ready, HR radiant. Daniel's hand tightened around his cup until the lid creaked. He didn't know if he wanted to disappear or stay perfectly still until the universe explained itself. She talked like she meant it, which was rarer than it should be. No buzzword salad, just clean lines. What's working, what's breaking, what gets support, what gets out of the way. Every few minutes her eyes drifted, casual as a breath, to the back row. Not a performance, not a secret, just a quiet acknowledgement of a morning bench and a silver pin and a near collision that had put her heartbeat under his palm. When the applause came, it was the real kind, not the obligatory kind. People surged forward to introduce themselves, to tether their names to the new gravity. Daniel hung back, scolding his own racing thoughts. It was nothing. It was everything. It was a coincidence. It was a hinge. He stood as the crowd thinned, meaning to slip out unnoticed. Leah changed course mid-conversation and crossed the room with the half-smile of someone who refuses to be embarrassed by the truth. "Daniel," she said quietly, like they'd agreed to keep the world at a lower volume. He blinked. "So it wasn't just my imagination," he managed, trying for light. "No," she said, eyes bright. "And I owe you more than a thank you." The room hummed. The HR director watched with interest that felt like weather changing, and behind Leah, someone from senior leadership stepped in, face unreadable. "Ms. Hartman," he called. "A minute?" Leah didn't look away from Daniel when she answered, "Of course." Then, just for him, barely above a whisper, "We should talk." She turned toward the doorway where the senior leader waited with a folder marked urgent, and Daniel felt the day tilt again. Everything poised on an edge that promised either trouble or something he'd remember for the rest of his life. The days that followed carried an odd electricity for Daniel, like walking into a room where the air had just been charged by a lightning strike. He caught glimpses of Leah in hallways, always surrounded by people eager to impress, but sometimes, just sometimes, her eyes flicked toward him like a quiet check-in. He tried to bury himself in routine, typing reports, reviewing numbers, but every line blurred with the memory of that park bench. He told himself to focus, to be sensible. Yet one evening, as most of the office emptied, a shadow fell across his desk. "Still here?" Her voice, softer now, came with the scent of coffee she carried in both hands. She set one cup down by his keyboard. "Thought you might need this." He looked up, startled, fumbling for words. "You didn't have to." She smiled, not the polished professional smile, but the real one. "I know, but sometimes it's good to be reminded we're not invisible." The office lights buzzed above them, the rest of the floor darkening as timers clicked off. He studied her expression, noticing the faint exhaustion beneath her poise, the way her shoulders sagged once the audience was gone. "First week's rough," he said gently. "They test you. All of them." She let out a low laugh, shaking her head. "I don't mind being tested. I mind being doubted before I've even begun." Her words carried weight, but she softened them with a shrug, as if apologizing for honesty. He sipped the coffee, letting the silence fill with an unspoken understanding. For a moment, it was just two people at the edge of night, stripped of titles, connected by the shared ache of proving themselves in different ways. Then, footsteps echoed down the hall. A colleague poked in, eyes darting between them before disappearing with a raised brow. The unspoken rumor ignited instantly. Daniel could feel it in his bones. Leah saw it too. "Great," she muttered. "That'll start whispers." She straightened, mask sliding back on, but her hand lingered on his desk a fraction too long before she walked away. The next morning, whispers were everywhere. Not cruel, not yet, but buzzing like flies. Daniel knew office gossip's favorite food, innuendo. He avoided eye contact, kept his head down, but Richard from the next cubicle leaned in with that sly grin. "So, late nights with the new boss, huh?" Daniel bristled. "It was coffee. That's all." Richard chuckled, unconvinced. "Sure. Just be careful, friend. People love a story." Daniel wanted to snap, but instead he swallowed it down. He hated that a simple kindness could be twisted into spectacle. Meanwhile, Leah called a team meeting. Her tone was steady, her leadership sharper, But Daniel noticed the faint tension in her hands as she held the marker against the whiteboard. She was aware of the eyes, the whispers, and then, mid-discussion, she looked straight at him and asked, "Daniel, what's your take on this?" The room quieted. Dozens of gazes shifted to him. He cleared his throat, gave his analysis, steady and precise. Leah listened, nodding, then built her decision around his suggestion. The tension cracked into applause. For the first time in days, Daniel felt the ground beneath him solidify. That evening, rain smeared the city windows into streaks of silver. Daniel stayed late again, headphones in, lost in spreadsheets. A sudden flicker cut the lights, plunging the floor into near darkness. Emergency bulbs glowed red in corners. "Of course," he muttered, yanking the headphones off. A sound-quick footsteps echoed down the corridor. He turned, pulse spiking. A figure emerged, phone flashlight slicing through the gloom. "Daniel." Lee's voice. Relief shot through him before he could check it. "Power outage," he said. "Nothing serious." She stepped closer, light catching her features. "I thought everyone had left. Glad I'm not the only one trapped here." They laughed lightly, but the air felt heavy, charged. Then a crash from somewhere deeper in the building cut their laughter short, a metallic clang that didn't sound like failing lights. Leah froze. What was that? Daniel listened hard, every nerve awake. Another sound followed, sharper, closer, the slam of a door. Lee's eyes widened, her flashlight beam jittering. Daniel stepped in front of her without thinking, instincts old and automatic. "Stay behind me." They moved slowly toward the stairwell, shadows long against the walls. Another bang echoed, closer still, too deliberate to be coincidence. The building wasn't empty after all. Daniel's pulse pounded as they rounded the corner, the beam of light skimming across a figure at the far end of the hall. Someone was there standing still, watching them. The air locked tight. Lee's hand gripped his arm unconsciously, nails pressing through his sleeve. The figure shifted, then started walking their way, slow and unhurried. Daniel felt every muscle in his body coil, the kind of readiness that comes when you know something is about to change, and not for the better. The sound of those footsteps filled the corridor, each one echoing heavier than it should have. Daniel's heartbeat thudded in his ears, but he kept his body steady, angling himself between Leah and the figure approaching. The emergency lights pulsed dim red, painting the stranger in half shadows. "Hello," Daniel called, his voice even but edged with warning. No answer, just that slow, deliberate pace, like whoever it was enjoyed stretching the moment into something unbearable. Lee's grip on his arm tightened, her breath shallow. For the first time since he'd met her, she didn't look like the confident new leader. She looked human, frightened, searching his eyes for reassurance. "We need to move," Daniel whispered. He guided her toward the stairwell door, but the stranger's steps quickened, breaking into a brisk advance. Daniel shoved the stairwell door open, the hinges groaning loud in the silence. They rushed inside, his hand braced against the railing, pulling Leah close behind him as their footsteps thundered downward. The stairwell's echo swallowed them whole, metal against metal. Leah clutched her phone flashlight, beam bouncing wildly. "Who was that?" she gasped. "I don't know," Daniel said, teeth clenched. But they weren't here for work. The crash of another door echoed above them. Whoever it was had followed. Panic tried to claw its way up his throat, but Daniel forced focus. "Basement," he said. "Security office is there." They pounded down the stairs, every landing feeling like it stretched longer than the last. Leah stumbled once, but Daniel caught her, lifting her steady with one hand without losing stride. They burst into the basement level, the air damp and smelling faintly of cleaning supplies. A single fluorescent flickered overhead, making shadows twitch across the walls. Daniel led her down the narrow hallway, but then froze. The security office door stood wide open. Inside, the monitors that usually showed every corner of the building were dead, screens black. A chair lay overturned on the floor. "This isn't right," he muttered, scanning the room. Lee's voice cracked with nerves. "Daniel, what if this isn't random?" He turned sharply toward her, brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" She swallowed, hesitated, then whispered, "When I was promoted, I wasn't just brought here to manage. There are people who didn't want me in this role. I thought it was politics resentment. But what if it's more?" Her words chilled the air further than the flickering light could. Before Daniel could respond, the stairwell door above them slammed again. Heavy steps echoed closer. "We can't stay," he said firmly, grabbing Lee's hand without ceremony. They darted through the basement corridors, weaving between crates and maintenance closets. His mind raced. Why tonight? Why here? Why her? The crash of footsteps behind them answered none of it. Finally, they pushed through a side exit into the underground parking garage, their breaths exploding in the cold air. The place was nearly empty, cars scattered like islands under buzzing lamps. The echo of pursuit still chased them, louder now. Daniel scanned the row of vehicles, spotted his old sedan, and tugged Leah with him. "Get in." She hesitated, fear in her eyes. "If they're after me, you shouldn't dash. No time," he snapped. He unlocked the doors, shoved her inside, and swung into the driver's seat. The engine roared to life just as a figure stepped into the garage entrance, silhouetted against the red glow of the emergency lights. For one frozen second, they locked eyes with the intruder too far to see clearly, but close enough to feel intent. Daniel slammed the accelerator, tires screeching as the car shot forward. Leah braced against the dashboard, her voice trembling. "Daniel, they knew we were here. They knew." The figure in the rearview shrank as they sped away, but Daniel's stomach knotted tighter. This wasn't coincidence anymore. It was a game, and they had just been pulled into it. What neither of them knew yet was how deep the game went or how dangerous the next move would be. The night swallowed the road as Daniel's car tore out of the garage, headlights carving shaky tunnels through the dark. His grip on the wheel was so tight the veins stood out across his hands. Beside him, Leah sat rigid, her breath sharp, her fingers pressed hard against her knees as if willing herself not to shake. Neither spoke at first, the silence broken only by the hum of the engine and the slap of rain against the windshield. Finally, Daniel asked, low and steady, "You need to tell me everything. What did you mean people didn't want you here?" Her throat worked before words came. "When they offered me this position, I stepped into a fight I didn't see at first. Not everyone at the top wanted a change in leadership. Some people warned me, said I should decline before I made enemies I couldn't manage. I didn't listen." Her voice cracked at the edges. "Now I'm wondering if this was the mistake they promised me." Daniel's mind raced, pieces clicking together faster than he wanted. The blacked-out security office, the deliberate pursuit, the way the stranger had moved with purpose instead of panic. He glanced at her, saw fear straining the edges of her composure, but also something fiercer buried inside defiance. "If this is connected to your job," he said, "then it won't stop with tonight. You need to be careful who you trust." Leah gave a bitter laugh. "That list is shrinking by the hour." They fell into silence again, tension stretching thin. The rain worsened, hammering the car roof like fists. Suddenly, red lights bloomed ahead roadwork. Barriers funneled traffic into one narrow lane. Daniel slowed, scanning the shadows between the cones. His stomach dropped. A black SUV idled just beyond the lights, engine rumbling, too conveniently placed. "Seatbelt tight," Daniel muttered, already calculating. The SUV moved as they approached, sliding into their lane like a predator blocking prey. Its windows were tinted, impossible to read. Lee's hand gripped the dash. "Daniel, dash, I see it." The SUV slowed deliberately, forcing him to crawl behind it. Rain streaked the glass, distorting the brake lights into smears of blood red. Daniel's jaw clenched. They were being boxed in. He flicked his eyes to the mirrors. Another pair of headlights appeared behind them, closing fast. "They're hurting us," he said through his teeth. Panic edged Lee's voice. "What do we do?" He didn't answer, not right away. He tightened his grip on the wheel, then suddenly veered left, smashing through the flimsy plastic barrier into the closed lane. Tires screamed against wet asphalt as the car fishtailed, then caught traction. The SUV lurched to follow, horn blaring, but Daniel pushed the accelerator down harder. The car leapt forward, dodging abandoned equipment and blinking hazard lights. Leah gasped, bracing herself against the seat. The mirrors filled with chaos, the SUV cutting through cones, the headlights behind swerving wildly, trying not to lose them. Daniel threaded the sedan through narrow gaps, every nerve alive, eyes darting for any escape. Then, up ahead, a gaping trench cut across the road where construction crews had torn up the surface. Metal plates covered part of it, slick with rain, but only just wide enough for one vehicle. He aimed for it, heart pounding. The sedan hit the plates with a teeth-rattling slam, skidding but holding. The SUV wasn't so lucky its bulk made it slide sideways, tires screeching, before it smashed into the barricade with a sickening crunch. The headlights behind slammed brakes too late, colliding into the SUV in a burst of sparks and twisted metal. Daniel didn't look back. He kept the wheels steady, breath ragged, as the road opened clear ahead. Beside him, Leah pressed a hand over her mouth, half shock, half disbelief. The city lights eventually reappeared in the distance, a false promise of safety. Daniel eased the car into a side street, finally stopping under the dripping canopy of an overpass. Both sat in silence, the engine ticking, rain hissing around them. Daniel's chest heaved as adrenaline ebbed, leaving his body trembling. Leah turned toward him, eyes wide, green irises sharp even in the dim light. "You just saved my life. Twice." Her voice cracked, the weight of what had almost happened pressing down on her. He shook his head. "I only kept us moving. Whoever they are, they'll come again." She closed her eyes, a single tear slipping free. "Then I need you to stay near me, Daniel. I can't do this alone." The vulnerability in her voice cut deeper than the fear. Before he could answer, his phone buzzed on the console. Unknown number. He hesitated, then swiped to answer. A distorted voice came through, calm and cold. "You should have stayed out of this." The line went dead. Daniel stared at the dark phone screen, his knuckles whitening as his hand closed around it. The threat was blunt, personal, and it left no room for doubt whoever had chased them wasn't finished. The sound of rain filled the silence between him and Leah, but her breathing was sharp, uneven. She reached out, steadying herself on the dashboard as if the words from that call had knocked the air out of her. "They know you now," she whispered. "You're marked because of me." Daniel shook his head, jaw tight. "Don't do that. Don't put this on yourself. Whoever they are, they made their move. That means they're exposed. And exposed people make mistakes." His words carried more confidence than he actually felt, but he knew he couldn't let her see the crack in his composure. She needed an anchor, and he had to be it. Leah pressed her palms against her face, then lowered them slowly, her green eyes flashing with something fiercer than fear. "I can't let them win," she said. "If I run, if I hide, they'll destroy everything I've worked for and worse. They'll keep chasing until I have nothing left." Daniel studied her, the determination in her tone clashing with the tremor in her hands. He respected it, but it terrified him too. "Then we fight smarter," he said. "Not harder. First, we figure out who's pulling the strings." He turned the key, the engine rumbling again. "But before that, we need somewhere safe. Not your place, not mine, both too obvious." His eyes scanned the dripping concrete columns around them until an idea landed. "I know a place," he muttered, shifting into gear. They drove in silence for a while, both lost in thought, until the rain eased into a mist. Daniel turned into an industrial area where old warehouses stood like forgotten giants. He pulled into the back lot of one, a structure he knew well from his father's days working there. Most people thought it was abandoned, but Daniel still had a key. He killed the engine and led Leah inside through a rusted side door. The air smelled faintly of dust and old oil, but the roof didn't leak, and the shadows gave them cover. He flicked on a single lamp that hummed to life, casting a circle of light. Leah stood in the middle, arms wrapped around herself, her sharp confidence dimmed by exhaustion. Daniel pulled a blanket from a storage crate, draping it over her shoulders without a word. Her eyes softened briefly, gratitude slipping past her guard. As she settled against a stack of crates, Daniel paced the concrete floor, replaying the evening. The blackout, the figure in the hall, the SUV, the phone call. It was too precise, too orchestrated. "This isn't random, Muscle," he said aloud, half to himself. "They cut power, disabled security, and tracked you into the garage. That takes planning." Leah looked up, her face pale but resolute. "There's a name I keep circling back to," she admitted. "Jonas Keller. He wanted the promotion I got. He smiled when I was chosen, but his allies didn't. I brushed it off, thought it was office politics. Now," she trailed off, fear sharpening the silence. Daniel nodded slowly. "If it's him, he's not working alone. We need proof before we make any move. Otherwise, we're the ones who'll look paranoid." Leah leaned forward, her voice trembling but firm. "And what if waiting costs us more than reputation?" Before Daniel could answer, A sharp metallic creak echoed through the warehouse, faint but unmistakable. Both froze. Lee's eyes darted toward the dark rafters above. Daniel lifted a hand, signaling her to stay quiet. He moved slowly toward the source, every step calculated, ears straining. Another creak. A shadow shifted against the far wall too large to be a trick of light. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the only thing he had, a small utility knife he'd carried since his mother's days of telling him to always be ready. The silence stretched taut until it felt like the air itself might snap. Then, a voice broke it calm, mocking, and far too close. "You really thought you could hide here?" The voice rolled through the warehouse like smoke, low and certain, making Leah flinch and Daniel stiffen. He pivoted toward the sound, utility knife steady in his hand, his eyes scanning the shadows beyond the circle of lamplight. A figure stepped forward from the dark, slow and deliberate, as if savoring the reveal. Broad shoulders, a coat dripping rain, and a face half-lit Jonas Keller. His smirk looked carved from stone. "I have to admit," Jonas said, voice echoing off concrete, "I didn't expect you to run this far. But here you are." Cornered, Leah shot to her feet, the blanket sliding off her shoulders. "Jonas, what the hell are you doing?" Her voice cracked but steadied quickly, laced with fury. Jonas's laugh was dry, humorless. "What I should have done weeks ago remind you that power isn't handed down to the naive. You stole my future, Leah. And this." He gestured toward Daniel, knife glinting in his hand. "This stranger thinks he can protect you? Pathetic." Daniel's pulse thudded, but he stepped forward, shielding Leah with his body. "You'll have to go through me first." The words came calm, though his chest burned with adrenaline. Jonas tilted his head, amused. "Brave, but you don't know the game you've walked into. This isn't about promotions. It's about who controls the board when the dust settles. She doesn't belong in the seat she's been given. And you dash," his eyes narrowed, "dash, you're nothing but a loose end." Daniel tightened his grip on the knife. Loose ends can unravel entire plans. Jonas's smirk faltered, just for a second. Then he lunged. The clash was sudden, brutal. Jonas swung first, but Daniel ducked, the blade slicing air. Daniel countered, slashing across Jonas's sleeve, drawing a shout of pain. Leah scrambled backward, searching the crates for anything. Her hand landed on a rusted metal pipe. She clutched it, trembling, then forced herself forward. Jonas pressed Daniel hard, their bodies crashing against crates, sending dust and echoes flying. Daniel's knife clattered across the floor, skidding out of reach. Jonas grinned through the struggle. "You're outmatched." Daniel, breath ragged, shoved his shoulder into Jonas's chest, buying a second of space. Leah swung the pipe, the sound ringing sharp as it struck Jonas across the arm. He howled, stumbling back. "You think you can fight me together?" His fury twisted into something wild. "Then you'll fall together." Daniel seized the moment, grabbing Lee's hand. Now, they bolted toward the side door, Jonas's footsteps pounding after them, curses echoing through the cavernous space. The night air hit them cold and sharp as they burst outside, rain misting their faces. They sprinted across the lot toward the car, but Jonas was faster than either expected. He caught Daniel by the shoulder, spinning him hard against the hood. Pain shot through Daniel's ribs as he struggled, but he managed to lock Jonas's wrist, forcing the knife hand down. Leah didn't think she drove the pipe into Jonas's side with every ounce of strength she had left. He crumpled with a guttural sound, knife clattering onto the wet ground. For a heartbeat, the world went still. Rain tapped on metal, Daniel's breath ragged, Lee's chest heaving. Jonas groaned, clutching his side, fury still burning in his eyes even as he weakened. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance. Someone must have heard the fight. Leah stared down at him, trembling but unflinching. "You won't take anything else from me." Daniel pulled her close, steadying her shaking shoulders. "We need to go," he said, urgency cutting through the haze. Together, they stumbled into the car, engine roaring to life as the blue-red glow of sirens bled across the horizon. As they sped away from the warehouse, silence stretched, broken only by their gasps. Finally, Leah turned to him, voice raw. "You didn't have to stay. You could have walked away the second this became dangerous." Daniel glanced at her, rain streaking the windshield like silver scars. "I told you before I fix things. And maybe this time it's not just a dress or a broken seam. Maybe it's you." Maybe it's us. Her eyes softened, tears mixing with the rain on her cheeks, but she didn't answer. She didn't need to. In the quiet, in the storm's aftermath, something undeniable had been forged between them, not from chance, but from fire. Sometimes fate begins with the smallest moment, and nothing is ever the same again. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe, hit the bell, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your support helps bring more stories like this to life.